Jeff, why don't you come on up? And Jeff has a lot to share about Haiti and the week that he spent there ministering to the people there.
Good morning. I can reiterate what Aaron and Angela were saying, how the prayers are felt. The smoke in heaven from the incense of the saints was tremendously filled from you guys and from everybody. Even George Bryson, founder of Calvary Chapel Church Planting in Russia, has told me that all the churches in Russia were praying for the Haiti trip as well. And so your prayers were felt, because this was by far the hardest missions trip that I've ever been on. I've been on 8 mission trips with Firefighters for Christ. The first 7 were in Russia. And this one was not only emotionally the hardest, it was physically the hardest, just because of the intense heat and humidity and the work that we were doing. It was not as much evangelistic as it was work. We did a lot of construction. And so I'm going to go ahead and show some slides, because it's easier to explain what we were doing chronologically with the pictures. So if you dim these lights. Okay, when I went down there, I'd seen, a few pictures on the news of what the devastation was like. They always showed the palace and some of the buildings, but I was not prepared for what I saw. This appears to be a rubble pile that a big, heavy piece of equipment piled up debris from another building or several buildings, but that actually was a building that just crumbled in that way. As you can tell, there wasn't much in the way of rescue done there, and so I'm sure that there's many people that are perished inside there, and probably I would say 50% of the buildings on the streets that we went down were either collapsed or in that type of destruction. And the whole time we were down there, we only saw 2 pieces of heavy equipment that were doing work, taking buildings apart and removing debris. So it's going to be years of process of getting that country back in order. Next slide. This was where most of the people did their marketing, because even though 90% of the buildings were uninhabitable, there were still some that were. But the people were afraid to go inside, period. And so everybody lived out on the streets, even though maybe their little stores were able to do business. They didn't want to do business inside. So wherever they could hang food, clothes, marketing type items, they just hung them wherever, set up little booths and put them on fences and walls, and that's where they did all their business. Next slide. This is just another typical building where probably some rescue was done, because it sort of pancaked down, but wasn't totally a pile of rubble. But literally all the streets had at least 50% of the buildings that looked like that. And then others were maybe not totally collapsed, but broken and cracked, and parts of them had fallen down. So there wasn't anybody living indoors. And this is a country of millions, and Port-au-Prince, the city itself, had probably several million. Next slide. This was an orphanage/clinic that we visited, not the one that we worked out of, but this was one where we went to get a picture and a diagram of a desk that we were going to build for the orphans. And the monies that we collected here from you guys that you so generously gave was pretty much I was the cash cow of the trip, that provided all the lumber for the desk that we built and for the shelter tent that we built. So, you'll be able to see where your generous donations went. But the people at the orphanage we worked out of knew of this orphanage, and they had desks there that they wanted to emulate. So that was where we went. But these were people that were treated for wounds and were actually sleeping there. But you can just see the nature of the wounds and the age variance of the kids and the adults. Next slide. It took us 6 hours to buy this lumber. It was an adventure in itself, getting through Port-au-Prince to find a place that would sell us lumber and have the quantity that we needed for the work we were doing. Our goal was to build 30 desks. They have 50 to 60 orphans in the 2 buildings around the area that we were at. And we bought enough materials to do that, but we finished 20 of them complete, which was enough to accommodate all the kids there to sit for school, because they basically were waiting for us to complete these desks so they could start school because they had nowhere to sit. Next slide. While we were unloading wood, one of our team members, Kathleen, who was the daughter of a firefighter that was on our team, is a registered nurse, and she was doing some clinical work while we were there. Next slide. This is the federal police headquarters, where you saw a lot of pictures probably on the news, because this was directly across the street from the palace that collapsed. And across the street from the palace was where in this property they set up a tent hospital that YWAM was responsible for setting up. And this is just an example of the type of hazards that were around in town all the time. I mean, this is 3 to 4 weeks after the earthquake, and there's still air conditioners hanging off wires, and people are going, walking in and around this place. But there wasn't enough people there to do the necessary work to make it a safe work environment. So it was just through the protection of God that nobody got hurt. Next slide. This is the tent that they were doing surgeries and amputations and wound cares out of. And that's about as good as it gets. And this was set up right away. There was later on a more advanced tent that we were shown our last day as we were leaving, that the University of Miami had set up in the airport where the UN facility was. But this was one that was set up by YWAM, and this gal named Omi was the director of YWAM missions down in Haiti before the earthquake, and she just got automatically put in charge of being the commander, or the incident commander, of all the operations that were going on downtown Port-au-Prince, whether it be food distribution or wound care, or in this case a hospital. And just keep her lifted up in prayer. She's a Haitian American, but has been down there serving in Haiti for many years, and just the amount of stress that her job entails and what she's accomplishing with a continual smile that the Lord Jesus is putting on her face is literally amazing. Next slide. This is one of our team members, Carl, a Pasadena firefighter, who took an opportunity to pray for this girl while we were sitting there waiting to find out what we were going to do.